Thank you for joining us. I'm Connor Doyle, the Director of Communications for the Hoya Center for Pacific Strategy, joined by Chris Capishon, Director of Programs. How are we doing today, Chris?
Doing great, Connor. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited. I want to jump into your new series on the Center's Substack, America's Strategic City. Well, first off, how did you come up with that name? How did you come up with the idea? And what made it so central to being San Diego?
Great question. So, the idea behind America's Strategic City came from San Diego's motto itself, America's Finest City. And as Blaine, our executive director, and I chatted, we were talking about like San Diego isn't just a tourism hub with great weather, great beaches, and, great food and culture. It's a strategic city. Its location close to the U.S.-Mexico border, its natural deep water harbor, the obvious large military presence that we have here, the strong academic and research institutions, and the native industry from high tech companies and life sciences like Qualcomm and companies like that.
Yeah, and importantly, and I love that you bring that up in terms of native, the heritage, you set the scene from a landmark perspective coming to shore with Spanish, and they're looking at the geography. And your part one is fixated on geography. How did you come to geography as your pretty much your primer for the series?
Yeah, so I thought geography is really important. It kind of really sets the stage. The author Robert Kaplan, in his book The Revenge of Geography, says geography is merely the unchanging backdrop against which the battle of ideas is played out. So, and I wanted to choose somewhere that I like to go into San Diego and take people who come to visit, and we go to take them to the Cabrillo National Monument, and we go out to the edge there of Point Loma, and from there you can see everything that downtown San Diego has to offer. You see our amazing port and harbor with ships from small sailboats to massive cruise ships and aircraft carriers coming in and out. You can see all the way down to the U.S.-Mexico border. You can see the thriving downtown and all the skyscrapers of all the high-tech businesses that's here. You can look to the east and you see the busiest single runway airport in all of North America, with traffic coming in and out. So there's just so much to take in from that one perspective to really see how the geography of San Diego itself lends itself to be America's strategic city.
Absolutely. And Chris, you do a good job of also touching on that it's not just the military aspect. And I think that's another reason why to be excited towards your part two of this series. We really kind of focus in on the climate aspect. How did you approach that? How is climate the next step in your series?
Yeah, so climate, ocean science, and resource security are, as called it, the triple threat for the Pacific century. There are three things that don't just affect us here in San Diego. It affects the entire Pacific hemisphere. Approximately 15% of the world's population lives on just 4% of the total landmass. That's 1.2 billion people that are directly affected by climate change, ocean science, and resource security throughout the Pacific area. So that was something that I wanted to focus on, something like a common resource problem, just something that affects everybody, and it's not just unique to San Diego, but it applies to everybody in the Pacific.
I also want to, you mentioned this term during one of your articles, and for anyone that's new to it, you introduced the term blue economy. For anyone that's new to the phrase, what is the Chris Capistrán? Doesn't have to be a dictionary definition. What is the Chris Capistrán definition of blue economy? Especially since you just illustrated it greatly with how much population lives next to the coast.
Yeah, so the blue economy is really balancing maritime resources with the needs of a modern culture. It's balancing the needs of sustainable fisheries, sustainable aquaculture, mitigating pollution of coastal waters, mitigating coastal erosion, and things along those lines. So it's really balancing how we harness the energy of the ocean for its resources and minerals and things along those lines. But then it's also how do we be a responsible steward of that resource.
Yes, love the resource discussion there. And I want to tie that into something you discussed, to Garrett Hardin's Tragedy of the Commons. Why does that theory still matter today when we talk about the Pacific?
Yeah, so Garrett Hardin's theory that he published in 1968, I think still applies today because he posits that if two competing people are have shared use of a common resource, that they will both use it until it collapses, and then no one gets to use it. And I think that's important, especially with something as tangible as fisheries in the Pacific, where you have overfishing in the South China Sea, and other competing areas where areas are being overfished, under policed, to so that you are unable to enforce sanctions or the general maritime agreements that happen between nations.
Before I know you've been so gracious to give us your time, Chris, but I just want to lastly touch upon this term that really popped out to me, and it's actually like a dual use term. But you bring up the term coastal megacity. What does that model actually look like? Can you give us a little bit of a sneak peek?
Yeah, so in geography, they use the term megalopolis, and it's typically associated with like the east coast of the United States, where if you take Boston all the way south to Washington D.C., it's really one giant megapolis. It's one giant mega city. There's very few spots along that stretch of the interstate where there's rural areas, and the same thing applies to the West Coast. And I think starting here in San Diego, all the way up north at the five until you get to the greater Los Angeles area, and then even beyond that to Monterey and San Luis Obispo, and all the way up to the Bay Area, it is one big city, almost the entire coast of California. And we have different climates, obviously, but we're all generally we're all affected by the same things: climate change, ocean science, and resource security.
Excellent, Chris. And lastly, very last sneak peek at part three. You mentioned a little bit at the end of your article.
Yeah, so next in 2 weeks for part three, I'm really going to dive into the trade, economy, and infrastructure of San Diego, and how San Diego is not just a regional trading and economic power, but it's really a global economic power with the trade and economic and the infrastructure that is present here in Southern California, and how San Diego is connected to the world and the world to San Diego.
Exciting things to come, Chris. We're all looking forward to it. If you haven't caught his work before, part one is out, part two has just dropped, and part three will be in a couple weeks. Check us out on social media at LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. We are live. Thank you for your time, Chris. We'll catch you soon.
Thanks, Connor. Have a good night.
You as well. Record.